Welcome back to the Garden Hutch. Today we'll discuss week 20 of 2022. Let's get going. Week 20 for us was really exciting. There were a lot of things that happened that were sort of off of the trend for the year. For example, the weather actually turned nice towards the end of the week. So, like we got a little bit of rain, and then believe it or not, the evening temperatures were in the 50s. It hadn't been that way since like early May when we got, down into the 50s. The heat indexes were back to where they were supposed to be normally, like in the 60s or so. We even had one day where it didn't get above 60 the whole day. So that was pretty interesting for us. It also kind of gave a lot of our plants and our greens and things like kind of a respite from the heat. A lot of those plants are beets, carrots, that sort of stuff. They prefer the cooler temperatures than the hot temperatures. So that's kind of why we sort of segregate them into spring, fall crops versus the summer crops. So that was good news. We got that. Then we got an unexpected call from the bee man, which was a huge thing for us. We were so excited. I'll put a link up here in the top. We did a whole video when we got our bees. We put the nuke in, that sort of stuff. So we'll take a look at them this morning. And then there's just a few other things. Like we did get the big garden planted. We'll go down there and look at it and talk to you about it and stuff. And then we are picking some more veggies. A lot of our spring crops, because of the heat, we're starting to thin out and eat. So we'll go through those as well. But the first thing I wanted to show you folks this morning was last week we had looked at our onions where our cats are bringing their field mice. So let's go take a look at that real fast. So as you can see now, over here where these are bent down, and then in this little area right there, that is where our cats have been coming. And then what happened was, I believe Otis was using this, and then our newest cat, Frazzle, saw him doing that and has now adopted this little area right over here. So, in the garden, it's important. This is going to happen, especially whenever you have cats that are inside, outside, or you have animals that regularly visit your yard. They're going to find residence every once in a while in your garden. What we're going to do, though, is I'm actually just going to kind of leave this for now. I have a whole lot of bush beans. I have the Blue Lake Stringlish bush beans, and I also have some purple hull peas. And either one of those will do well in this area. So what we've begun to do is, because, these, you can see down here, these onions right here, they're still delicious. It's just like right where they're bent over for maybe an inch on either side, the stem gets a little soft and it's not as tasty to eat. But you can pull these. They won't die in the ground. They're not going to rot. You can pull them as you go and kind of eat the greens on the top, and then, eat the bulbs itself and just take out that little section. So we're slowly but surely going to do that this week and next week. And then once we're done, I'm going to go through and I'm going to try an experiment this year where I put in a bean in all of the empty spots. So we wanted to give everything a chance to get established, such as these onions, right? So when we put our beans in here, they're not going to grow because they're bush beans. They're not going to grow high enough to start shading out the onions that aren't broken and left. But they will, give us like a bumper crop. And we love purple hull peas and we love green beans, that sort of thing. So, just kind of on the same topic here between our eggplant, you can see how far we spaced them out. And that was the reason we talked about it when we did it. But, the eggplants, they'll get, yay tall or so. I don't know. They'll get probably a little bit taller than these stakes by the end of the year, and they have these big broad leaves. But if we put them in this upcoming week, we put all the bush beans in down here, by the time that happens and they get their larger canopy, the beans will have a chance to establish. And even if they get some shade, as long as they get a little bit of light, they'll still go to flower and produce beans. Perhaps not near as much, but the important thing to think about is if you get some beans out of here, just not as many because of the sun, that's way more than you would get if you get no beans out of here for just not putting them in the ground. So that's sort of the approach we're taking this year. We, the bush beans are not expensive at all, especially if you get them at your local co-op. You can get large buckets or large bags of them for really cheap. We got enough to where we anticipate being able to fill all the holes in our garden. And I believe it's going to be enough. We'll see. But we got that for less than $8. So Another example here, these squash plants are going to grow considerably more. I'm not real familiar with these scallops, but I've grown the yellow like most of us here in the South have. So what we'll do is we left these little front right through here, right? And the advantage is, like we've said in the past, what we do with our squash is we will, this little pattern that where we, alternated back and forth, next year we're going to rotate that and do the opposite. So where we're putting the beans in the quote unquote holes in the garden, where we're putting those this year is going to be where the squash will be next year. And as many of you know, beans, the roots of them, they actually put nitrogen back into the soil. They produce their own. And if you go through when you take your plants out and you just cut the tops off and leave the roots in the ground, what ends up happening is it's like a natural fertilizer, natural way to get nitrogen back in the soil. So our strategy is going to be, since we're doing raised beds, we don't really want to do a crop rotation because everything is kind of in its place because of its relationship with chickens, et cetera, et cetera. So because these are sort of a permanent location, if we can just rotate, the areas where the crops are, that's going to have a big impact for us, we believe, long-term in pest control. It'll also, I say, give us those little bumper crops of the beans and such that we love so much in the winter. Before we moved on to the top garden and the big garden, I did want to just kind of give everybody a call out to myself. I know I had told everyone that we are cutting off the strawberry flowers. We're cutting them all off until June 1st. But I think I mentioned this before. I did let one go here, and we are actually getting a little strawberry on it. So, but I am sticking to my word on every other strawberry plant. So, I'm about, 99% on that. But I just could not help myself. I saw that one come on there. It was super close to June. I cut off the other ones and I told Leslie, you know what? I'm just gonna let this one go so I can have an early strawberry. But, it's important to stick by your guns, but strawberries are also delicious. So I suppose since we showed the strawberries, I might as well just give a blackberry update just here real quick. You can see there are blooms all over these guys. They're year 3, a lot like the other projects in the yard, the baby fig trees, that sort of stuff. And what we anticipate getting a yield this year. So it may not, and if so, it's not going to be the end of the world, but you can tell from these flowers and such that it looks like we're going to have a relatively good crop of blackberries. So our goal with these blackberries is to put what we can daily on our salads, to go with our kale and such, to kind of sweeten the salad up a little bit, add extra vitamins and such. But long term, there's no way, as prolific as these guys are, that we're going to be able to eat them daily without them going bad on us. So last year we experimented just a bit with freezing some of them. They handled it just great. I froze enough to make a blackberry crisp in the wintertime. We loved it. So that'll be something that we do with these guys. We'll eat what we can throughout the day. Whatever's left at the end of the day, I'll throw on a cookie sheet in the freezer. Next morning, I'll just take it out and throw it into a bag, leave that bag in the freezer. When the winter time comes around and we want a warm dessert, we will take these guys out and make a blackberry crisp. Before we get to the bees and the pallet garden real fast, I wanted to stop here in the top garden and kind of just go over a few things. I don't want to do a whole garden tour every week, unless you guys want to see it, that's fine. They are a little lengthy, and I know not everybody has, 40, 45 minutes to sit down and watch a video on it. We have had an overwhelming response though to growing these ground cherries, so I wanted to show that, and I also wanted to kind of give an update on our zucchini and just an overview of the garden. So let's take a look. So the zucchini are hard to miss, right? I'll just go over them real fast. We are still getting, I think last week we got 7 or 8 zucchini. So we've been eating zucchini at least every other day, if not every day, this last week to 10 days. We have flowers all over the place. This little cool spell that we had, the female flowers have slowed down just a little bit, but starting this upcoming week, it's going to be back in the high 70s, low 80s, and we'll get back to getting a whole bunch of our zucchini. Also, it'll be awesome to have our bees to help fertilize them. We'll still do it by hand just to make sure, but our purple hull here are coming along really nicely. So obviously they were planted behind the wax beans and the pole beans, but they're catching up nicely. We had talked about how our potatoes had drowned out when we got that crazy rain after we healed them. And you can see I haven't seen anything come up in some of the spots, but back there is one that resurfaced. So perhaps the gentleman who told me this was correct. He said they may get swamped out a little bit, rot off at the top if you get, you know, that 5-6 inches of rain. He said, but some of them will come back, some of them won't. But if we're lucky, what'll happen is these potatoes from here will just kind of stretch out, you know, down towards the fence line and fill that in. And if not, we'll just have a spot where we don't have potatoes. And if that's the case, that is just fine as well. We may not meet our goal, but it's important to set them so that you have something to strive towards. But again, this is why I wanted to come up here and kind of get, as these things grow, right? This was the first layer here of the ground cherries, and this is the first year I grew them, so all of this is super interesting to me. I hope it is to you as well. But see, this first, you can see here, this first little area, these guys are bigger, and then as the stems grow, every one of these little guys are getting ground cherries on them. So my hope is that these guys are really prolific, because I've been bragging about them to my family so much that I've got a list of folks who would like them, to try them, I'm sorry. And if those folks like them, I anticipate them wanting to have extras, just like Leslie and I do. Real quickly, you can see up here, our aromas, because of that heat spell, we're already getting these nice little clusters of tomatoes. Our beefsteaks are also just rocking out. They haven't started putting the fruit on as much. We showed it the last time that they had just started kind of getting their flowers, those big old nice looking flowers on them. So I'm gonna have to come out this week probably and tie them up here at the top. It looks like this fella back here, you can see he could probably use it today. So once I get done with all of my chores today, there's a good chance I'll be out here tying tomatoes up again. All right, so we finally made it up here to my favorite part of the week. We're gonna take a look at the bees. Before we look at those, I am gonna kind of show you some of the beets and the carrots. Those things are coming along great. This cooler weather will help them out a little bit, kind of prevent them from going to seed as soon so they can get a little bigger in the roots, but they were delicious. We had some friends over this weekend. We had a blast. The kids love pulling their own carrots. I'm not sure, I know I get giddy about it, but you know, because we don't have kids, I wasn't really thinking much about it. And that was like their favorite thing to do, was they kept coming out into the carrot patch, and they'd want to, you know, pick out their own carrot and pull it and wash it off. And anyway, it was a fantastic time. If you haven't grown them and you have small kids, or you have, you know, grandkids or whatever, carrots are a great way to connect with them in the garden. Okay, with that out of the way, let's take a look at the Pallet Garden and the bees. For you folks who watch, you'll know that this bed here and this bed over there, those are our two. We keep carrots over there for the spring and the fall. We keep beets in here, and we rotate our beets and turnips in this bed. We'll go plant half of it in beets early, and then when the time comes for the turnips, put them in. And then what you can do is, when we pull the beets, we'll put in a new round of turnips around that time. These turnips will come out, and then we'll have time to put in our fall beets on the other side, so that we're constantly rotating this out and eating from this bed. But the reason we're down here today is I was going to, let me get over this fence here, show you how much these beets have started to swell. And the reason I'm showing you this up here is because you can see there is a much larger beet, and that one's a bit smaller. So the strategy for us is we'll take the big beet out mid this week. We'll roast it with some sweet potatoes, or put it on a salad or something. And then that'll allow this beet right here to kind of grow. And eventually, by the time we get to it, it'll exceed the side of this one. And then over the next, 3 to 4 weeks, we will go through, and this whole area of beets by the end, 4 weeks from now, say, mid to end of June, all of these beets will be out of here eaten. We'll consume the greens, the beets themselves, and everything. And then what we'll do is we will plant this with turnip seeds, and this over here we continue to thin out. But I mean, we eat a salad out of this part of the bed as well, like literally every day, and you can see it's just kind of taken over. So what'll happen is these greens start getting big. We'll go through, we'll start thinning them out, and we'll actually cook these greens instead of putting them in salads. And that'll thin those out so the turnips on the bottom can start to swell, much like we did with the beets. And then, the whole process will just play itself out once more throughout the course of the year before the winter hits. And we'll step over here to the carrots. And again, I cannot tell you how much fun it is. You can see down here, if you can see through the grate, that we thinned out a lot of these carrots over the weekend, and it was exciting. The kids loved it. Me and Leslie loved it. Their parents enjoyed it because, you know, they were eating healthier foods and such. And what we've discovered is you can sort of take your finger down there and see that's got a nice top on it, but the root itself hasn't started to develop as much. So what we started to do, and we found it out with the kids, because of course they liked pulling the bigger carrots out, you know, than they did the smaller ones. So we started kind of cheating and kind of looking at the tops and helping them pick out the larger carrots. But you know, it's getting a little thinner in here. These guys will probably let sit for another week before we eat more carrots, just because we ate so many. But by the end of next week, so say a week from Friday, they're going to be, the carrots will have had a chance to swell back up, and especially with this cool weather, it'll give them an advantage as well. So but that's where we're at with the carrot beds. Peppers coming along nicely. There's not really much to talk about. We got a lot of flowers and such, but overall I'm happy with the pepper bed. I do think what I'm going to do next year is take these, all of the peppers, and put them where our zucchini is, and then we'll move the zucchini to the old garden. That way I don't have to worry about my chickens eating them, you know, where they ate all of our peppers and tomatoes this year. But I just wanted to show once again, we've got all the head lettuce out here, and the chard has already started to respond positively to removing the head lettuce. So this chard right through here, if you'll remember from last week, you know, it wasn't big, wasn't nice and leafy, but once we removed those head lettuces, the chard has responded nicely. And you can see I left the bottom of the head lettuce in, and what'll end up happening over time is, as long as the weather cooperates, we could still get another head of lettuce from there. But because that chard is responding so well and getting bigger, it may not come to another head, and if that's so, it's fine. But if not, it would be great to have some more lettuce before it gets, you know, too warm. This lettuce here did really well. I think I'm going to replicate this entire bed again next year, only because as it's gotten hotter, this kale has actually helped our leaf lettuce here. It blocks out a lot of the warm noonday sun. You know, there's sun. The leaves get up and they expand, and they block a lot of the things that would normally wilt our lettuce. So it's responded really well. And then up here, we've done the same thing. We thinned this out. We had guests over. We made lunch out of these salads. They went over really well. But just one more time to show you how we cut them. This is, instead of pulling it out, we cut it like so. If there's time before it bolts, we could get a whole nother one of these heads of lettuce before, you know, say end of June, early July. And that parsley, this is the parsley that we put in between them to kind of, we didn't want the parsley to burn. So when we put it in there, we used, you know, use your resources, right? So we used the lettuce to kind of help shade the parsley and keep it from burning up. Yeah, cherry tomatoes. I cannot wait for tomatoes. We all know that's why I started gardening. It's my favorite thing. Many of these cherry tomatoes will never even make it into the house. There's one of our first clusters of the year down there. Looking nice. Flowers everywhere. Tomatoes like it when it gets below, you know, 70 degrees or so at night, but they do like the hot temperatures in the daytime. All right, so this is something I've sorely missed. Again, all of you who've watched the channel know I did all this by hand. I brought the topsoil in, you know, did all that, because this is a severe slope before I started, but put it all in. And right now the bees, because we put them in there with frames that already had some propolis and honey, they were kind of set up already. Now we can see, well, it doesn't look like we can see in there very well, but there are bees everywhere in there. So we started looking into them, and again, I put that link up there earlier, but I was hoping we could get a shot. But I do these videos, you know, 6:30 in the morning, so the bees aren't real active a lot of times until later. There are a few drones coming in and out. I'm sure they're looking for their pollen. I should tell them that they should go attack those zucchini, but at this point I haven't quite learned to speak bee yet. So now we're up here at what we call the big garden. This is kind of a late addition to our gardens and such, and we haven't completely decided what we want to do with it long term. So Anybody who knows me knows I like to come up with an idea, look at it for a while, draw it out, look at it for a while, put in a, you know, like sort of a semi-permanent structure first that I can remove if I don't like it. And then once I like it, sort of make it permanent. So that's sort of the stage that we're going through with this big garden. We put in full rows of bush beans, the blue leg bush beans. We put in 2 rows of purple whole peas, the bush variety. And we put in 2 rows of spineless okra. Our family loves okra. So my aunts, uncles, cousins, all of those folks, whenever the okra starts coming up, they want my wife to make pickled okra. So it's really important for us. That's something we really like to give out at the end of the year. It's just another way to get friends and family over into your garden, being able to socially kind of introduce people to what you're doing around the homestead. So we really like that. I just wanted to go over that real fast. I probably won't be showing this much. It's not going to be pretty. It's really weedy. It's hard to keep clean because the dirt is so hard and it's really rocky. So far though, we've had a lot of luck with okra and beans. Either next year or the year after, I'm considering doing this all in raised beds, and then between the raised beds perhaps doing berries on one row, and then the next row like some dwarf fruit trees, and just sort of alternating between the 5 rows with that sort of concept. I haven't decided yet. I think it's probably something I'll contemplate a little more in the fall once I see the overall yield, how the other beds did. Is there a hole in our diet here on the homestead that I need to fill specifically with this room? Anyway, we'll find all that out. You know, everything is always kind of a work in progress here on our homestead, at least. And I think most people would agree that, you know, gardening and homesteading is one of those things where you learn every year. You need to be adaptable in order to be successful. So with all of that being said, I just want to say thank you to you folks that have made it here till the end. If you have not, please consider subscribing to the channel. It does help us out significantly. You can hit the little bell icon. YouTube will notify you when we upload new content. If you enjoyed this vlog, please consider giving it a like. And until next time, I hope that you folks take care of yourselves. Peace.